Hi, this is Kylie with Fem and Flow. Welcome back to the Blueprint Restored series. In part one, we talked about the arc of restoration. In part two, we went deep into the body, how fascia, blood, breath, and brainwaves form the architecture of coherence. Today, we're expanding outward because the moment coherence stabilizes in your body, it begins shaping your entire life. Your body is not separate from your relationships, your choices, your creations, or your field. When you embody true tone, life reorganizes itself around that frequency. So let's talk about the light body activated. Picture this: your Merkaba is spinning, not as a forced practice, but as the effortless geometry of your field. Chakras hum like well-tuned crystal bowls. Breath, and blood move as one coherent current. Your energetic system has folded into itself in such a way that tone, your true tone, becomes the organizing principle for everything that follows. This is not theory. It is a felt reconfiguration. The body becomes a transmitter, the field becomes the scaffolding, and life rearranges itself around that frequency. So we begin at the womb because the womb is the first organ of architecture in the personal field. It is not merely a biological place, it is a resonant chamber, an antenna, and a birthing gate. When the womb sings in true tone, the whole life story rewrites. Between the womb and the heart runs a central column, the vertical spine of intimacy and intention. I like to call it the heart womb column. You'll also see it named the vertical axis, midline pillar, or countless other terms for this. This column is the pathway through which the creative impulse in the pelvis rises to become held, tempered, and embodied in the heart, and through which the heart's light descends to ground as embodied form in the womb. It is the bridge where magnetism becomes matter. So let's talk about what the heart womb column is: an energetic and anatomical map. So, first off, it's an energetic channel, a spiraling current that links the resonant coil of the pelvic womb with the resonant chamber of the heart. It's the place where intention and feeling meet and stitch into action. Now let's talk about the anatomical correlates. It rides the midline, thoracic and lumbar spine, the diaphragm, which is the membrane that literally separates and also connects belly and chest, the fascial planes of the anterior posterior torso, the vagus and phrenic nerve pathways, and the connective tissues that bind heart, lungs, and pelvic floor into a single functional unit. It's also a tone conductor. This column conducts true tone. As the womb holds a base frequency, the column amplifies, modulates, and translates that frequency into the heart's language: compassion, boundary, and relational magnetism, and back again. It's also an emotional integrator. Trauma, shame, devotion, grief, and desire often lodge along this line. When coherent, it becomes a place where shadow is met with warmth and transmuted into balanced radiance. So, now let's talk about what happens when it's stabilized. So, the first thing is aligned breath circulation loop. The diaphragm and pelvic floor synchronize, so breath, blood, and tone move as one upward downward spiraling loop. The second thing is clear emotional translation. The heart no longer overreacts, or the pelvis no longer shuts down. Instead, impulses get translated into appropriate expression and held energy. The third thing is vertical coherence for action. Intent no longer leaks into anxiety. It moves as a contained, directional force that issues from the womb and blossoms in the heart before meeting the world. The fourth thing is resonant decision making. Choices become somatic. A yes is felt as an unbroken humming through the column. A no is a gentle closing grounded in the pelvis and held by the heart. So now let's talk about what the womb is, energetic and archetypal. So it's a resonant chamber and coil. The womb is a spiral capacitor. It holds tone, stores generational memory, and acts as a harmonic amplifier. Think of it as a tiny cathedral whose shape remembers how to hold light. It's also a bridge between inner and outer creation. It is the primary interface where intention, inner tone, becomes form, outer life. Whatever field is stabilized here translates into the kinds of people, places, and projects that can anchor with you. It's also an emotional and mitochondrial hub. The womb records relational templates and metabolic rhythms. It modulates how available you are for deep creative surrender versus tight survival. And let's talk about the true womb versus the physical womb. For some, this is anatomical. For all, it is a fielded vibrational capacitation that sits in the pelvis. A holographic womb present in both people with uteruses and those without. So now let's talk about what's happening in a stabilized womb, the signature of true tone. The first thing is a steady hum and persistent tone. The pelvic field sustains a bass frequency, not loud but constant. This tone guides breath, hormone rhythm, and fascia tension in a way that supports creativity and receptivity. Number two is clear boundary resonance. The womb's field draws in people, places, and opportunities that are sympathetic to its tone and repels those that are dissonant. Relationship and work begin to self sort. The third thing is coherent weaving with the spine. The womb tones interlace with the mid back pulsing gate and vertical axis, the Merkaba, creating a through line for embodied intention. Then the fourth thing is felt safety and creative trust. Nervous system regulation improves. The body no longer distrusts novelty because the womb holds the template that new creation will be cradled. Number five, fertility of projects. Not only children, but ideas, collaborations, and creative forms incubate more rapidly and with clear fidelity to source intent. So now let's talk about how the womb functions for female-bodied people. This is a practical energetic map. So the pelvic fascia as antenna. The fascia around the uterus or womb acts like spiraled wiring. It remembers tone and transmits it outward. The next thing is cyclical intelligence. Menstrual cycles or cyclical hormonal rhythms, even when non bleeding, become tonal calibrators, windows where the field rereads and realigns. Each cycle becomes an opportunity to redefine true tone. The next thing is gatekeeping through receptivity. The embodied womb knows what to let in. As coherence increases, there's less need to defend and more capacity to choose what aligns. The next thing is embodied rituals. Practices like pelvic breaths, womb tone chanting, gentle somatic massage, castor oil packs, and pelvic fascia work support the waveform and help the womb hold tone. These are scaffolding, not replacements, for inner alignment. So now let's talk about how the womb functions in male-bodied people, the equivalent architecture. Men do not have the same anatomy, but they do have a pelvic core that can form the same energetic capacitation. Hara, or the pelvic plexus, is the male womb. The lower belly, perineum, prostate, energetically, and pelvic floor form a resonant chamber analogous to the womb. The center holds generative tone and anchors creative potency. It has sacral resonance and containment. In many men, the sacral pelvic field is the reservoir for felt creativity, libido, and ancestral patterning. When stabilized, it supports grounded creative leadership rather than anxious force. So, another thing it does is polarity and containment work. Stabilized male pelvic fields learn to contain power without projecting it. They become safe vessels for mutual co creation rather than resources of reactivity. Supportive practices. Hara breathing, pelvic floor exercises that are tone based, not just strength. Prostate friendly somatic care and voice tone work help the center hold true tone. So, now let's talk about the mechanics. How a tuned womb or pelvic field reorganizes life. The first thing is frequency first, form follows. When the womb or pelvic field stabilizes to true tone, the field sets the gravitational center. People, opportunities, and resources that match that frequency accelerate toward you. The second thing is field based selection. Your life's shape shifts from random events to curated resonance. Social circles, clients, creative projects, and even home spaces match your tone because incompatible templates cannot hold. Number 3, reduced friction. Decisions that previously took hours of mental wrestling collapse into felt clarity. The body's tone offers a one-line test. Does this match or not? Number 4, Eros as economy. Attraction energy, Eros, becomes the primary currency. It is not lust, it is aliveness that magnetizes resources in synchronistic events. Eros is the return current of God. Number 5, form follows tone in the nervous system. As coherence becomes habitual, the nervous system stops producing survival level chaos and instead allows flow states that make sustained creative output possible. So, now let's talk about what to expect as life reorganizes. Here are some signposts. Synchronicities increase. Meetings and messages arrive with uncanny timing. Gatekeeping becomes effortless. You say no without drama, and fewer things target you for attention. Projects seed more quickly. Incubation periods shorten, and collaboration shows up aligned. Bodies around you shift. People's behavior mirrors your field. Partners step into new roles or step away in service of alignment. Financial and material reshuffling. Money and logistics reroute to support the new form of your creative life, often in ways that feel more graceful. So, here are some micro practices to support the pelvic tone for both sexes. Daily pelvic diaphragmatic breath for 5 minutes. Tone chants for 2 to 3 minutes. Low, steady notes. Gentle fascial work, self massage, breath with pelvic floor release. Here's a weekly ritual. You could do an embodied check in, journal one sentence. My pelvic tone today is. And also, you can do environmental tuning, a small altar, warm compresses, or an object held to the lower belly that carries your intention. So, here's the key to all of this so far. The blueprint restored in your life all starts at that heart womb column. When polarity is spent in balance, it doesn't merely stabilize two forces, it bursts a third field of creation. In our bodies, the Merkaba is literally two spinning tetrahedrons, the feminine tetrahedron and the masculine tetrahedron, each tuning in their own geometry. When those two tetrahedrons find coherent spin, equal torque, mutual resonance, they intersect and produce a third field, the vertical living axis between heart and womb. This is not abstract metaphysics, it's the way our inner magnetism folds into form. That third field, your heart womb column, is the alchemical engine of creation. It is where yin and yang stop opposing and start composing. The pelvic supplies that generative impulse, the seed. And your heart supplies the holding light that sustains it. The column is the creative topology that stitches them into an energetic womb in which things can be born that are not only functional, but alive and luxurious. Relationships, projects, homes, businesses, songs, children, and new ways of being. So the womb is not merely a site for physical childbirth. It is a generative field, a coherent magnetic workshop where source impulse becomes delighted expression. When the heart womb column is tuned, creation is not grinding work, it is play. Things flow, people, projects, and resources don't have to be forced into place. They are invited, recognized, and welcomed by a living field that knows how to cradle them. This is the physiology and the poetics of true manifestation. Polarity balanced, Merkaba coherent, third field active, and life reorganizes not by effort, but by resonance and joy. So now let's talk about how your unique blueprint shapes the way you create. The white spiral isn't one size fits all. Once true tone stabilizes in your body and the heart womb column is humming, creation shows up. But it shows up in the language of your fractal. Your divine blueprint maps a palette of expression. Some people birth through relic like craft and sacred space, others through velocity and public leadership, and others through conversation and translation, and others through ritual and touch. The key is that coherence produces authenticity. Authenticity produces form, but the form will always wear your signature. So here are a few archetypal flavors. And this is just energetic shorthand, not pigeonholes. So the first archetype is Venusian, sensual, aesthetic, relational. This is creation through beauty, touch, surface, and intimacy. Works might be interior design, perfume, fashion, dance, sensual art, hospitality, loved based enterprises. The tone is slow, luxuriant, and tactile. So another archetype is solar, authoritative, radiant, and sovereign. They do creation through center stage embodiment. Leadership, performance, public facing work, legacy building institutions. And their tone is bright, direct, and clarifying. Another archetype is martial or marsic. And this is kinetic, structural, and courageous. They might do creation through form, craft, and muscle, like architecture, physical training modalities, tactical enterprises, and sculptural work. And their tone is incisive, decisive, embodied force. The next archetype is mercurial, liminal, intellect, communication. They might do creation through exchange, translation, teaching, writing, technology, networks. And their tone is nimble, adaptive, curious. Another archetype is lunar or priestess. They are cyclical, intuitive, and holding. And they might create through ritual, initiation containers, healing arts, cyclical offerings like courses or seasonal rituals. And their tone is slow, recursive, and deep. The next archetype is Jupiterian. They are expansive, philosophical, and curatorial. And they create through ecosystems, cultural projects, schools, festivals, publishing, large scale visioning. And their tone is generous, broad, and integrative. And the next archetype is Neptunian or mystical. And they might be transpersonal, dream, imaginal. And they might create through myth, music, visionary art, film, or devotional practice. And their tone is porous, evocative, and transgressive. So, you might be wondering how these different fractals play out in real life. Here are some examples. A Venusian who stabilizes true tone might find their home becomes a living gallery. Their relationships deepen into ministry, and their career flows across interiors, perfumes, and sensual performance. They magnetize patrons, lovers, and collaborators who value texture and tempo. A mercurial blueprint might have creation appear as a stream of launches, collaborations, articles, and educational courses. Ideas that spread quickly and iterate. Their life reorganizes around networks and platforms. A Marshall blueprint will see structure arise: a studio, a physical practice, tangible products. And their field attracts apprentices, contractors, and disciplined partners who match their execution tempo. And you can absolutely be a mix of these different archetypal energies. Here are some practical signposts to notice how your fractal creates. So, number one, where does your energy feel most alive? In a studio, on a stage, in a bedroom, in a lecture hall, in a sacred circle, at a construction site? Number two, what sensory language lights you up? Do you love silk and scent, rhythm and motion, words and logic, ritual and stillness? Number three, what feels effortless to start and hard to stop? Some examples: rearranging a room, teaching a class, building a prototype, composing a score. So answer these, and this gives you a little insight on the language your blueprint prefers. So here are some micro practices to amplify your signature expression. And these are some short tools tailored by archetype, and you can do this a few minutes a day. So if you're drawn to the Venusian archetype, you could do a surface attunement ritual. Light a candle, arrange 3 objects that feel like you, play a 6-minute song or listening practice, and journal one sentence. Beauty I make today is. If you feel drawn to the solar archetype, you could do a morning proclamation, a clear 60-second vocalization of your day's directive. You can also do physical centering, like 5 push ups or sun salutations to ground radiance. If you're drawn to the martial archetype, you could do a tactile sketch. 10 minutes designing a small structural iteration like a floor plan, equipment layout, movement sequence. And you can finish by mapping one immediate next step. If you are drawn to the mercurial archetype, you could do a rapid fire creativity sprint. For example, 15 minutes of writing, voice notes, or outreach, and capture 3 connections to follow up. If you are drawn to the lunar archetype, you could do a cycle check ceremony. Note where you are in your inner cycle and offer one small rite like tea or a warm compress or breath work to honor the phase. If you feel drawn to the Jupiterian archetype, you could do a curator's list. Create a short list of 5 inspirations or opportunities to fold together into a larger offering. And if you're drawn to the Neptunian archetype, you could do dream mapping, 10 minutes of free drawing or sound improvisation, and notice symbols that repeat. And remember, I mentioned it, but expression is fractal, not fixed. Your blueprint is a language, not a box. Many people are hybrid. For example, a Venusian Mercurial or a Solar Venus blend. Think charismatic creator with a refined aesthetic. As your heart womb column deepens coherence, these hybrid notes harmonize, and your output becomes more layered, both intimate and magnetic. So now let's talk about Eros as the pulse of coherent creation. At the center of creation and coherence lives Eros. And we've talked about it before, but it's not just sexual energy, it's not just desire, but the raw pulse of aliveness that moves through every cell when true tone is embodied. Eros is what it feels like when life force itself wants to express through you. It is the shimmer of possibility in your skin, the pull toward beauty, the charge that rises when you encounter resonance. When the womb and heart are connected through the central column, Eros becomes safe to feel and safe to move with. Instead of leaking out as compulsion or being suppressed into numbness, it circulates as an intelligent current. This is the difference between craving and creativity. Craving drains, but coherent Eros builds. Eros is not separate from Source, it is the return current of God. If creation itself is God's outbreath into form, then Eros is the in-breath drawing us back into union. It is the current that carries us home while still letting us play in matter. This is why Eros feels both magnetic and devotional. It isn't only about pleasure, it's about remembering where we come from. When you feel Eros, you are literally feeling God's heartbeat rippling back through your field. So let's talk about how Eros works inside coherence. The first thing is it works as fuel. It is the electrical spark that ignites creation. Without Eros, projects feel heavy, mechanical, or obligatory. With Eros, even the most mundane task carries a golden thread of aliveness. Inside coherence, Eros also works as compass. Eros shows what is in resonance. That sense of being magnetized toward a person, idea, or experience is not random. It's the body's way of saying, this matches my frequency, pay attention. It also works as a field expander. When Eros flows, it doesn't just stay in the body. It expands your aura, strengthens your Merkaba, and extends the reach of your field. Others can feel it. Synchronicities gather around it. It also works as a coherence check. If something shuts Eros down, feels flat, or collapses your energy, that's often a sign of dissonance, not just mood. So now let's talk about Eros and the third field. When feminine and masculine polarities spin in balance, they create the third field, the heart-womb column. Eros is what moves inside that column. It is the shimmering current that braids upward from the pelvis into the heart and outward into the world. This is how creation feels when it's aligned, not strained, not calculated, but charged, fluid, and magnetic. So let's tie this back to the archetypes I mentioned. There are different faces for Eros and different archetypal expressions. Here are some examples. Venusian Eros might be sensual, tactile, expressed through beauty, aesthetics, touch, art, interiors, dance, perfume. Solar Eros might be radiant, charismatic, expressed through leadership, performance, voice, and direct presence. Lunar Eros might be soft, cyclical, expressed through ritual, care, holding, deep intimacy. Martial Eros might be fiery, embodied, expressed through physicality, sports, discipline, architectural design. Mercurial Eros might be quick, playful, expressed through words, wit, conversation, writing, and networks. Each of us has our own blend. For some, Eros is velvet and candlelight. For others, it's fire and drum beats. The key is not to suppress or distort it, but to allow it to become the creative fuel of your life. So now let's talk about coherence as lifestyle. When coherence stabilizes, it's no longer just an inner state. It becomes a lifestyle. Your body sets the template, but then your choices, your rhythms, and even the way your calendar flows begins to move with that same frequency. Life stops feeling like something you have to manage and starts feeling like something you get to dance with. So here's how coherence feels in daily life: ease without passivity. You move through your day with a sense of flow, but that flow has direction. It's not drifting, it's being carried by a steady current. There's clarity without rigidity. Decisions no longer come from mental overthinking. A yes feels like a hum through the heart womb column. A no feels like a gentle closure. This clarity frees up energy you didn't know you were losing to indecision. There's vitality without burnout. Because energy isn't leaking through dissonant projects, relationships, or environments, you have more stamina for what actually matters. Your nervous system knows how to stay in parasympathetic flow while you create, move, and engage. You have intimacy with the ordinary: eating, walking, creating, resting. All of it feels textured and alive. The mundane isn't flat anymore. It glows with coherence because your field is informing it. Let's talk about how life operates inside coherence. You have synchronicity as schedule. Instead of rigid planning, synchronicities begin to shape your timing. Emails arrive when you were just thinking of someone. Opportunities show up right after you've cleared space. The outer world mirrors your inner tone. You have aligned relationships. People who resonate with your field are drawn closer. Those who no longer match drift without drama. This doesn't feel like loss, it feels like natural selection by resonance. You have creative surplus. Ideas come more quickly and projects incubate more efficiently. You don't have to force them, they ripen in the fertile atmosphere of your coherent field. You have economy of energy. You spend less time on friction, more time in flow. Even challenges reorganize around coherence, resolving with more elegance than strain. You have sacred play. Work, rest, and creation blur into one field of play. What you once called tasks now feel like extensions of your tone. Cooking, writing, exercising, or designing all carry the same underlying hum of source. So now let's talk about the texture of a coherent lifestyle. A coherent lifestyle feels like walking into your own divine design and finding that reality has adjusted itself to support it. You notice more stillness in your mornings, more synchronicity in your afternoons, more beauty in your evenings. You stop asking, "How do I make this happen?" and instead ask, "What is my field inviting today?" Living coherence is living in conversation with God's return current. It is no longer about climbing out of chaos into brief peace. It's about letting peace, beauty, and clarity set the baseline, and then watching life orchestrate itself around that tone. Now let's talk about from loops to alignment, the mindset shift of coherence. One of the clearest signs that the blueprint is restored is the shift in mindset. Before coherence, the mind often runs in loops: repetitive thoughts, doubts, replays of the past, worries about the future. These loops are the mind's way of trying to hold control when the body field isn't stabilized. They feel like spinning wheels, generating heat but not movement. When coherence stabilizes, those loops soften into alignment. The mind no longer has to micromanage reality because the field itself is doing the organizing. Thought is freed from policing and returns to its true role: to clarify, to imagine, to articulate what the heart and womb are already generating. So here's what looping feels like: obsessing over what if scenarios, replaying conversations or choices, feeling like no matter how much you think, the answer doesn't land, an undercurrent of anxiety that thinking is supposed to solve but never does. Here's what alignment feels like: A thought comes with clarity, resonance, and direction. Then it dissolves once the message is delivered. Answers arrive more through knowing than through overanalysis. The nervous system trusts the heart womb column to filter what is for you. The mind becomes spacious. Ideas pass through like fresh wind rather than circling like storms. So here's how your life changes when the mind shifts into alignment. Your decisions simplify. Instead of hours of weighing pros and cons, you feel the hum of coherence and know what is yours. Mental energy frees up. The constant noise recedes, giving space for inspiration, creativity, and quiet. Your inner narrative changes. The voice in your head no longer criticizes or panics, it collaborates. It starts speaking as an ally, echoing your true tone. Time feels different. Loops create a sense of stagnancy. Alignment restores momentum. Hours and days flow with a natural rhythm. So here's the key shift. In a loop, the mind says, I must figure this out. In alignment, the mind says, I trust the field and I'll translate what it's already making clear. And this is the mindset of coherence. Thought becomes a servant of tone, not a substitute for it. So now let's talk about relationships and coherence. As your field stabilizes, relationships shift. Some will fall away naturally because they can no longer resonate with your tone. Others will deepen, becoming mirrors of your true tone. New connections arrive seemingly out of nowhere, drawn in by coherence. This can feel disorienting at first. But remember, the blueprint is always reorganizing you into resonance. Relationships become less about need or habit and more about sacred reflection. So, what happens when relationships reorganize around coherence? There's release without rupture. Old ties dissolve gently without the need for conflict or blame. You notice less drama and more quiet exists, as if life itself is reshelving the people in your orbit. There's depth over surface. The connections that remain become richer. Conversations hold more nuance. Presence feels fuller. You meet each other as soul to soul, not just role to role. Magnetism of the new. Coherence draws new people who match your resonance. Collaborators, friends, mentors, partners. They arrive without striving. It feels like destiny, but really it's resonance. And you have mirrors of evolution. Every relationship begins reflecting your true tone back to you. Some show you where you are thriving, and others highlight what still needs integrating. Both are gifts. So, let's talk about how to walk these shifts with grace. Trust the reorganization. When someone drifts, don't rush to hold them in place. Bless them, knowing the field is rearranging both of you for greater coherence. Honor the deepening. When a connection intensifies, lean in. Let yourself be seen more fully and allow your coherence to be witnessed. Welcome the unexpected. When a new person appears, notice what part of you they mirror. These connections often carry codes you need for your next chapter. Remember the bigger picture. Coherence isn't only personal, it's collective. Every relationship shift helps the wider field find resonance. So let's talk about the new foundation of relationships. In coherence, relationships stop revolving around survival, validation, or social obligation. They become temples of reflection, spaces where your true tone meets another's true tone, creating a third field of intimacy. This is why love, friendship, and collaboration in coherence feels lighter, yet infinitely more profound. They are no longer about filling a lack, but about amplifying God's return current in one another. Now let's talk about coherence and time. In the false matrix, time feels linear, scarce, and pressurized. It is something you are always running out of, something measured against productivity, age, or achievement. This creates the constant background hum of anxiety. Too late, too soon, not enough. In the bridge phase, time can feel chaotic. It rushes one moment, slows the next, sometimes even loops back on itself. Days blur or stretch. You might feel like you're being tossed around by currents you don't understand. This is the recalibration period where your nervous system is learning that time isn't fixed. But in true tone coherence, time becomes spacious. You begin experiencing time as rhythm, not scarcity. Instead of a line pulling you forward, time becomes a field moving with you. Deadlines soften. They still exist, but they stop carrying panic. You sense when things want to ripen and when they want to be released. Synchronicities cluster. The right people and opportunities arrive precisely when they're meant to, often in uncanny alignment. The pressure dissolves. You realize I'm not running out of time. Time is moving with me. This is the restoration of 4D, time as a cooperative field, not a trap. So, what does this feel like day to day? Mornings stretch open instead of rushing you. Work feels cyclical, not forced. You sense natural pulses of focus and rest. Waiting no longer feels empty, but like incubation. You notice perfect timing moments more often. Someone calls just when you were thinking of them, or a project lands at the exact right window. So now let's talk about living in rhythmic time. When coherence stabilizes, you stop trying to manage time and begin moving with it. Time becomes a spiral rhythm, a song you can dance to, rather than a ticking clock measuring your worth. Time feels less like a race and more like a score unfolding, with rest and crescendos written in. This is why coherence brings relief. It frees you from time scarcity and restores you into time partnership. You are not at war with the hours of your life, you are braided into them. Now let's talk about coherence in money and resources. In the false matrix, money feels like a survival tether, scarce, external, and transactional. It is chased, hoarded, or feared, and its flow often mirrors the anxiety of linear time. Never enough, slipping away, tied to pressure and performance. In the bridge phase, money can feel unpredictable. Sometimes it arrives in bursts, other times it dries up. You might notice old fears rising or patterns looping, overspending, withholding, seeking external validation through wealth. This is the nervous system unlearning scarcity while still testing coherence. But in true tone coherence, money and resources reorganize themselves around your field. Just as time becomes rhythm, money becomes current. It stops being a measure of worth and starts being an extension of your tone, a neutral servant of creation. So let's talk about how coherence shifts your experience of resources. So you go from scarcity to sufficiency. You feel supported even if the numbers don't yet look perfect on paper. There's a trust that what you need will arrive, and it does. You go from chasing to magnetizing. You don't have to strain for money. Opportunities, clients, or support are drawn into your field because of the resonance you carry. You go from transactional to reciprocity. Exchanges become about energetic alignment. You invest in what amplifies coherence. Others joyfully invest in you because they feel it. It goes from fear to play. Money becomes lighter. You experiment, give, receive, and circulate it without the tight grip of scarcity. So here's the deeper truth. Money is simply condensed energy, a placeholder humanity agreed upon during the false matrix. In coherence, it remembers its true role, to serve creation. When your heart womb column is stable, resources flow toward you because they recognize a safe, fertile field. They want to be part of the blueprint you are living. But as coherence expands collectively, money itself becomes obsolete. In the restored blueprint, creation is fueled by resonance, not by currency. Needs are met through synchronicity, shared field, and the overflow of true tone. Exchange becomes joy, not obligation. Resources circulate naturally because coherence itself generates abundance. So let's talk about living the transition. Right now, money still plays a role as scaffolding, but we are already glimpsing the new system. Every time you trust synchronicity over scarcity, every time you give and receive from coherence rather than fear, you are rehearsing life beyond money. Eventually, the scaffolding falls away, and what remains is the true economy of resonance. Money is not your master. It is a temporary tool, a bridge. As coherence stabilizes, you no longer live for money. Money lives for your blueprint. And one day, even money dissolves, and only the radiant current of God's abundance remains. Now let's talk about from healing to creation. For many of us, the first chapters of the spiral are about healing. We learn to tend our nervous system, clear ancestral trauma, soften old wounds, and uncoil the survival patterns that once kept us safe. Healing is essential. It prepares the body to hold more light. It makes the field trustworthy again. But it is not the end of the story. In true tone coherence, the emphasis shifts. You no longer live primarily in healing. You live in creation. And the current that carries you across that threshold is Eros. Let's talk about Eros as the bridge. Eros, the return current of God, is what moves you out of repair and into play. In the healing stage, much of your energy is devoted to stabilizing the body and soothing the heart. Once coherence lands, that same current that once mended wounds becomes the very fuel of creation. Eros doesn't just stitch you back together, it braids you into new possibility. So let's talk about this stage of healing. Survival imprints surface to be seen and released. Much of life feels like catching up, repairing what was distorted, soothing what was inflamed. Your attention is drawn backward toward the past that shaped you. Now let's talk about the stage of creation. Energy flows forward. Instead of asking, what do I need to fix? You begin asking, what do I want to build? The nervous system is regulated enough that you can sustain joy without sabotage. Healing still happens, but as a byproduct of creation. Wounds resolve while you're busy creating beauty. Life no longer orbits around trauma, it orbits around tone. So let's talk about why this matters. Healing is about restoring neutrality. Creation is about expressing divinity. Healing prepares the ground. Creation plants the garden. And the water that nourishes that garden is Eros, the living aliveness of source returning through your heart womb column. So you'll have a felt shift in questions. In healing, the questions sound like, what's wrong with me? What needs repair? In creation, the question sounds like, what's ready to be expressed? What wants to be born through me? So let's talk about actually living this transition. When you notice yourself circling the same healing loop, pause and ask, what would creation look like here? Often, the most profound healing comes not from reprocessing again, but from stepping into the joy of making something new. In coherence, healing is not abandoned, it is transfigured. It becomes the compost that fertilizes creation. You honor where you've been, but you no longer live there. You live in the field of now, sculpting beauty from the return current of God moving as Eros through your heart womb column. So let's close it. Let's talk about life in true tone. When the divine blueprint stabilizes in your body, it doesn't stop there. It ripples outward, shaping your relationships, your time, your resources, and your creations. What once felt random becomes rhythmic. What once felt pressured becomes playful. What once felt scarce begins to overflow. Your heart womb column is the axis of this new life. From here, polarity spins into balance. Eros rises as the return current of God, and coherence becomes the lifestyle you live in. No longer are you stuck in loops of fear or scarcity. You are aligned with rhythm, with resonance, with the living score of creation itself. Relationships reorganize, time expands, money remembers its role as temporary scaffolding, and your mindset shifts from fixing to creating. You are no longer just surviving the blueprint, you are expressing it. This is the beauty of coherence. Your life becomes the temple. Not something outside of you, not something you chase, but something you embody. Every choice, every connection, every moment of aliveness becomes a spiral reflection of Source. So as you step forward, remember, coherence is not just something you feel, it is something you live. And when you live it, life itself becomes art, sculpted by true tone, sustained by Eros, and forever reorganized into resonance with the divine blueprint. That is all I have for today. Next week, I'll be releasing the Blueprint Restored Part 4 on Earth. And also, just a reminder, go follow me on Patreon. I have a free tier and a paid tier. I've been posting more on the free tier. Just a reminder, if you listened to the last episode, I posted the Merkaba embodiment practice, and I recommend doing that once a week. Get that divine feminine current and divine masculine current in that beautiful balanced spin of polarity, so you can work into birthing that third field that we talked about here. So that's on Patreon under the True Tone Embodiment Collection. Like I said, that will be for free. Just maybe bookmark it so you can easily go there every week. And I'll be posting more on the free tier, and I'll continue to post on the paid tier. I would love to see you there. I love you all and have a great week.